So we have a great program to kick off the year. 2022 is going to be very different than 2021, as you might imagine. Tonight, we want to give you a perspective on what we're going to be doing during the course of this year, which looks very different than last year. And you're going to hear some very interesting stuff in about our strategy for the year. I want to start actually by welcoming some new folks to the team. And so I'll start by welcoming two folks from Darien, Georgia, and that's Beth and John Stevenson. Hello, Beth and John Stevenson. You see them there on your screen. They are the new chairs of our Mapping and Analysis Committee. I call it the Research Committee, but it's Mapping and Analysis. They live in Darien, Georgia. They spent more than 30 years in Atlanta. They both have backgrounds in public health and have been involved with a range of volunteer work in Atlanta related to social and environmental justice, youth development, and community development. John worked for over 30 years as a research statistician at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where he worked both domestically and internationally on improving immunization data and processes. Beth worked for 20 years with American Cancer Society and then 10 years with the CDC in program management, including focusing on public health education, health advocacy, and health communication. They are excited to be working together with fair districts to use their data and research skills to support the organization's mission to contribute to fair and just elections. So Beth and John, I want to thank you so much for stepping up. You were on the SWAT team at the tail end of the last year when we were looking at all those maps. You did a phenomenal job there. I know you're going to do a bang up job. Those of you who have been involved with mapping analysis, here are your two new leaders and we welcome them. At the same time, I want to wish Karen McCowan very well. Is she here tonight? Is she here? Let's highlight her for a second. Karen McCowan is the outgoing chair of the Mapping and Analysis Committee. I can't say enough about Karen McCowan and what she has done for Fair Districts Georgia. She's been with the organization longer than I think just about everybody. She was on the founders group, I believe, has led the Mapping and Analysis Committee for the better part of 3 years, 4 years probably, was pioneering all the efforts to dig data out of the bowels of the state and generate all the stuff, and worked with Princeton last year. So Karen, we know you're staying involved. You're not going away. You're just stepping back from the committee chairship. And I want to thank you for all the work that you did to get us where we are going. You've done a phenomenal job. And I know you're going to hand off the program to good hands in Beth and John Stevenson. So thank you, Karen. I also want to introduce Brooke White to you this evening. Brooke is the new chair of our outreach committee. We've had an outreach committee, but it was somewhat inactive the last couple of years because of the COVID pandemic, because the outreach committee used to do a lot of in-person events. We're transitioning that committee into a larger role. Brooke is an Atlanta native who moved to New York for college and recently returned home to Georgia after almost 20 years away. Welcome back, Brooke. Glad to have you back. She has been a volunteer organizer for voting rights and democracy for about 5 years. She lives in Decatur with her family and enjoys cooking, listening to music, and being in the great outdoors in her free time. So Brooke is going to be a breath of fresh air to our outreach efforts. You're going to hear more from Brooke later in the program this evening because she's going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the stuff she's thinking about. And this is going to be an ongoing rollout of stuff for the outreach committee, which really has the mission of engaging our citizens across the state and getting everybody involved. So she's going to be one of your go-to people for those of you watching tonight in terms of how do I get involved. And in fact, that's what we're going to talk about during this program. So thank you, Brooke, for joining, and appreciate you very much stepping up. Let me show you the program for this evening. Let me get to the top here. This town hall, can everybody see the slides? All slides are up. Everybody see? Great. So it's a call to action in 2022, which, as I said, it's a different year than it was last year because where we are in the process of redistricting and reforming. We just did the welcome. I want to start by giving a little bit of a recap of what happened in 2021 and a little bit of our strategy for 2022. And as you're going to see, we have a strategy at this point which has some high-level goals. We're going to be introducing programs throughout the year to fill in those goals. We're looking for your feedback as well on these goals. I'll do that. We're going to talk about litigation, as I mentioned, and we have a special guest speaker, a really knowledgeable experienced litigator in the world of redistricting who has joined us, who's part of our team that you don't hear from very much, but tonight you're going to hear a fascinating story about what's going on in the court system, the federal courts here in Atlanta. We're going to talk about local redistricting, which is something we did not really pay a lot of attention to last year because we spent all of our time on state house, state senate, and congressional maps. But now this year, the whole emphasis has turned over to what about your county commissions and school boards and all those things. And Janet Grant is going to share with you that. And then Brooke is going to come back and talk about how to get involved this year. We will have a Q&A at the end. I imagine you will have questions. Again, feel free to put those questions in the chat. Some of our volunteers will answer those questions in the chat as we go, but those that we cannot answer, we will tee them up for answering live on the program. So again, thank you very much for joining. I'll start by giving a little bit of a recap. So what did we learn in 2021? Well, the census came out. We know that Georgia is a rapidly growing state. It's very diverse. We are nearly a majority state, if we're not already, because the census is now, it'll be 2 years old, think about it, in April. So we probably have already transitioned into that state. And we continue to be a swing state politically. We saw this in the elections, which happened in January, where the 2 senators were elected. Very, very close elections in Georgia, and we expect that to continue, to be honest with you. However, we also learned as we advocated like crazy, and many of you, everybody was involved, trying to get fair maps done, that our elected leaders are resistant to change. They do not want to give up the power to draw the maps in their favor. And I can understand that, even though we think it's terrible. And that's why we are here, to try to fix that problem. And they're not afraid to wield their power, right? I would say that we did a pretty good job of advocating last year. Many people turned out for hearings across the state. Our voice was heard. And I would think that out of the 3 maps, the state house map came out okay, not great. The Senate map, not very good. The congressional map, clearly not very good either. So that's kind of what we learned last year in a high level picture. Again, if you want to hear more about our point of view on the maps in particular, go back and listen to our December town hall, where we gave you a wrap up of all the statistics and all the data and all the benchmarks. You'll see where we stand. I also like to, at the beginning of the year, say not only what did we learn about Georgia, but what did we learn about us in fair districts. So we do this little assessment of our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that we face this year. We have a lot of strengths that have improved greatly in the last year. We continue to have passion for the cause. We are now very well known by legislators. We literally changed the conversation in Georgia last year, largely because we brought in Princeton's gerrymandering project as a key partner. But all the advocacy that people were doing across the state in the hearings in the summer, people were telling about the work that fair districts in Princeton were doing. So we are now known. We are, I think, now the leading voice, or at least one of them, in Georgia for redistricting. People are coming to us asking for our opinion. So this is now a strength for us, whereas at the beginning of last year, I would say we weren't quite as well known. We are chock full of facts, data, and analysis. That's our stock in trade, working with Princeton, and our fantastic mapping and analysis committee. And we have strong partnerships now with many organizations, but I think the top 4 that we worked with very closely last year were the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. We were pleased to receive an award from them last year, and of course, Princeton. So those are our strengths. We think we have landed on the map. People know who we are. It's time for us to continue to leverage those strengths. From a weakness point of view, we still don't have a lot of Republican support, and I think you can understand why. But as a bipartisan organization who does not, we don't care which party wins an election. What we want is a map that's fair so everybody can compete. We still don't have a lot of Republicans who support this idea. Our team still lacks some diversity in terms of age and race. We want to reach out to more people and get more people involved. And from a funding point of view, we operate largely. We are a volunteer organization. We probably have upwards of 100 and some volunteers when you think about all the work people did, writing letters to the editor, postcarding, etc. We don't have a lot of money, and we'd like to obviously get more money because we could do more with more money. Opportunities. This year is an election year. Last year was the year to draw the maps. Again, we made some progress. Didn't get everything we wanted. It's an election year. That means that if we can make redistricting a factor in the election, we can keep this conversation in front of people, and we can start talking to candidates and incumbents about why they should advocate for fair district reform as part of their campaigns. So we want to leverage the fact that it's an election year in a swing state and a state that's still a target for reform. We want to leverage this higher profile that we've developed with everybody's help last year. We want to drive a lot of partner activities around redistricting, and we want to leverage our citizen network. We have 100 people on this town hall, which is fantastic. We probably started, if we were to do a town hall like this a year and a half ago, we might have gotten 20 people. So the fact that we have 100 people and we have a mailing list that's numbers upwards of 2,000, we have a lot of people following us. What we want to do is engage those folks and get them more involved. And you'll see when Brooke talks about how we're going to do that. There are still some threats that we faced, right? The majority power has all the power in Georgia. We get that. That's just the way the world works right now. And because it's an election year, we are expecting the majority party to do all sorts of crazy things to try to score points to get elected. We understand how politics works, okay? So we're just going to be faced with the fact that the majority party is going to try to do crazy things. Hopefully not many of them will involve redistricting, but you never know. We still operate in a pretty polarized political environment, even though we're a swing state. We have pockets of red and pockets of blue. We're going to see continued attacks on voting rights that is driven by this stolen election myth. We already saw a constitutional amendment proposed to get rid of to have non-citizens not be able to vote. A silly constitutional amendment was proposed. It was voted down in the Senate just a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. But we're going to see that kind of stuff continue. And because fair districts are part of an overall fair election model, we're concerned about those things. And it's possible we could see mid-decade redistricting. In 2011, the maps were drawn following the census, but in February of 2012, a whole bunch of changes were made to make the maps more favorable to the majority party. We hope we don't see that this year, but that's something we are actively watching for in the state legislature. So those are threats that we just have to be aware of and deal with as they come up. So that's kind of just a self-assessment of how we see ourselves as an organization and what are the opportunities in front of us. What should we expect in 2022? Well, we know that Georgia is still going to be center stage in the midterm election with some bellwether races. The Senate race, the governor's race, of course, is a big deal for us this year. And of course, Congress and state legislature, they're all members of Congress other than one senator, but all 14 representatives in the House, and all 236 state legislature races are on the ballot in November. So, and Georgia's going to be watched. We know Georgia is now a bellwether state. People from across the country look at us, right? Voting rights are going to be a central issue in this election. I have it on good authority from people who are running that they're very concerned about it. To us, voting rights in fair districts make up a broader topic of fair elections. I'd like to see us at the state elevate this conversation to, this is about fair elections. You got to have fair voting procedures and rights and fair districts. That's what makes up a fair election. So as much as possible, we want to tie those issues together, voting rights and fair districts, into a conversation called fair elections. That's really what we all want in Georgia. It's just fair elections. Now, we've defined a strategy for this year, which has 4 overall overriding strategic objectives, if you will. And again, these will get detailed into programs as we go throughout the year. But first is what I call Get Local. Get Local means last year, all of us were advocating towards a single momentous event called redistricting in the state legislature in November. All of our work led up to that. Everything that people did, engaged, and got that done. This year, what's happening in local is 2 things. Number one is there's now redistricting at the local level, county commissions and school boards. Janet Grant's going to talk about that. But we also want to take our advocacy work, and have it not so much oriented towards what's happening under the gold dome, but talk to your local candidates, talk in your communities. How can we get more people in the communities aware of redistricting, aware of the need to reform, and obviously transition to how do we make redistricting an issue in this election? Well, it really is all about what we do on the ground, and what you do when you're out there talking to your candidates and visiting their town halls is making redistricting an issue in the election. We think that's one way to keep us front and center in the conversation. You know, in the long run, we're shifting from fighting a set of maps that were built last year to reform. We want to advocate for legislation to fix this process in the long run. There is legislation pending right now. It's probably not going to go anywhere this year, but it certainly could be an issue in the campaign. So we want to continue to advocate for the legislation that would fix this process in the long run. But we also want to work to identify best practices and tools. The whole country has been through redistricting now. We want to reach out to some of the other states and find out what have they done that what have they done that has worked for them, and how can we bring some of that to Georgia. And then our last overriding goal is to build a more sustainable organization. That just means getting more people involved, bringing it more to a local level. Funding obviously would help, but we want to make our organization more self-sustaining because we realize that this reform process is a long-run deal. This is not something that's going to happen this year. We have to build support across the state. So when the moment arrives, when we have a chance, when we have some leverage in the politics, that we can then start to get both parties engaged and try to help support reform. So again, you're going to hear a little bit tonight about local level redistricting and some get involved things locally. You're going to see us roll out more detail around how we achieve these goals through specific programs and projects as we go throughout the year. We've got 2 of them teed up tonight, and I hope that you enjoy what you see. Again, that's kind of a high-level overview of our strategy for the year. Now, the next topic on our agenda is litigation. So those maps that we all worked on and we all advocated for have found their way to the courts. And I'm going to introduce to you now a guest speaker, Mr. Al Pearson's joining us. And I assume I can't see the screen, so I'm assuming we've highlighted Al so everybody can see him now. There he is. Hey, Al. So let me just tell you a little bit about Al Pearson. If I read his resume, we'd be here for 10 minutes. So let me give you a real short summary. Al has had a long and distinguished legal career in which he has practiced both criminal and civil law in Georgia state courts and the federal courts across the country. He actually taught constitutional law and civil rights litigation among several topics at UGA's law school. He is a past U.S. Supreme Court fellow. He has been actively involved in past redistricting lawsuits in Georgia. We are thrilled to have him not only here as a guest speaker, but he's been a friend of our organization for few years. And Al, I'm going to ask you to take the team now through what's going on with the litigation on these maps. I think you're going to find it a very fascinating subject. And Al, if you could unmute, we'll be able to hear you. Can you unmute, yes. Al? There we go. Good.
I'm unmuted. Well, glad to be here tonight and to see everybody and to see, realize we have such a nice turnout. The landscape has shifted from the legislature to the courts rapidly, as a lot of people anticipate. What I'm going to do tonight is tell you what's going on in Georgia and give you some sense of where things may go from the litigation that's pending in Georgia. The chart here in front of you lists the 5 cases that are currently filed in the Northern District of Georgia. The ones that really matter are at the top, Pendergrass, and then Alpha Phi Alpha and Grant at the bottom. Those are cases that are filed that challenge maps, either the congressional map or state house and state senate maps under the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. That they're not alleging a constitutional violation or a racial motivation claim. They're based entirely on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And all those cases are filed before a single judge, Judge Steve Jones, whom I've known for a long, long time. Those cases may or may not be correctly filed before a single judge. And I don't want to get into too much detail about that, but Judge Jones has got those cases. And he has basically teed them up so that a hearing is going to be convened on, I guess, Monday, February 7th. And Steve Jones has allocated 6 or 7 days for the hearings, and the likelihood of a quick decision from Judge Jones in these cases is very strong. Basically, all of the cases that are based on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is VRA, are vote dilution cases. They're basically taking the position that given the population shifts in Georgia over the last 10 years, the significant increase in minority population, that the maps that were adopted by the General Assembly underrepresent and understate political representation of minorities in Georgia, and they diluted the representation. And the request for the courts is to add several opportunity or majority minority districts in Georgia in light of the population shifts, and the complaints differ a little bit in what they emphasize the locale of places where they think about the black, the majority minority might be created, but all of them basically seek very similar remedies from the court. And I think the information that's been presented in front of Judge Jones, and I've looked through the files, is very well developed, and they've documented all the things you have to do in order to get a court to take those vote dilution claims seriously. And basically, you're just looking for a place where you've got a concentration of minority population, that they have been underrepresented in previous elections. You've got the history of polarization in voting. And all those elements have in the past been sufficient to get courts to recognize and create majority minority districts around the country, predominantly in the South. And the hope is that momentum will continue. Now, the problem we've got right now is that we're in an environment where we have a Supreme Court and perhaps the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is fairly receptive to an expansion of voting rights law, and we just don't know how that's going to come out. But a couple of developments that are important. One is there's this case that was just decided in Alabama, which is a vote dilution case involving the congressional redistricting in Alabama, and a three-judge panel in Alabama just recently invalidated the Alabama map and said that the state of Alabama had to create at least one, perhaps two minority districts in order to be compliant with their view of the law. Now, the reason that's important is that that case is a case that's based on the same vote dilution theory that the cases in Atlanta are traveling on. And Judge Jones is aware of that case and has cited that case in its preliminary rulings that he made in the Alpha case. And so there's a good chance that Judge Jones may rule in the same way that the Alabama court ruled and find some voting dilution infractions, and he might fashion a remedy that would be helpful to remapping in Georgia. So the Pendergrass, the Alpha Phi Alpha, and the Grant cases are all cases that are in front of Jones, and he's probably the best judge we can have in the Northern District to decide these cases. Now, the other two cases, the Common Cause case and the Georgia NAACP cases, are cases for a three-judge panel, and the lawyers in both of those cases are not going to do anything immediately. They are both scheduled for ultimate trial in March of 2023. And so they are really kind of off to the side right now. And so the question is going to be, is Judge Jones going to act, and how will he rule? But we're going to get something fairly soon from him. I'm predicting. He's done a lot of work on these voting rights cases, and he's entered some lengthy orders. I mean, he's on top of the cases, so I don't think he's going to be letting any grass grow under his feet as far as the current cases in front of him are concerned. So that's the good news. The things that are really worrisome is the Supreme Court of the United States has shifted, and there's a conservative bent on that on the court, and there are some justices, Alito, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, who are really hard-nosed on statutory interpretation, and there's a big movement to try to narrow the scope of VRA even further than it has been narrowed currently. So that's a worry. Here's the way things could play out. Judge Jones could enter an order, whether he rules in favor of the challenges or rules against the challengers. His opinion is not going to be the last word. It's going to go up to the 11th Circuit. If the challengers win, the state of Georgia will ask for a stay of the entry of the order, which has been granted in many cases recently. And so that could stall everything out for an indefinite period of time. The other thing that's sort of a wild card out here is the Alabama case has been decided, and the state of Alabama has filed a notice of appeal directly to the Supreme Court, which they have a right to do in what is known as 3-judge matters. And if the Supreme Court takes that case up, which I think they will, then everybody's going to be kind of frozen, waiting to see what the Supreme Court does with the scope of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so there are lots of things that could happen there. The state's making arguments based on Ruscio, saying that you can't do decide voter dilution cases as we have in the past, because Ruscio says partisanship is okay in gerrymandering, and they're already arguing, as they did in Alabama, that it wasn't race, but it was party partisanship that dictated how the maps were drawn. And so they're trying to get around Section 2 using that kind of strategy. There's also some language in the Voting Rights Act that says, nothing in this provision establishes a right to have members of a protected class elected in numbers equal to their proportion in the population. And there is an argument that's being advanced that the vote dilution cases that are being brought are essentially the cases seeking proportionate representation. Now, how that gets decided by the Supreme Court is up in the air, but that is that possibility is a very worrisome possibility for anything that might be done in the courts. So I'll stop now and be glad to answer any questions at any time.
Well, thank you, Al. That's fascinating. If I hear you correctly, what you're saying is they're justifying the lack of racial gerrymandering by saying, well, it was partisan gerrymandering. So it's gerrymandering one way or the other. We don't like it, but that's kind of where we are, right?
Yeah, and they're saying it's okay, and the Supreme Court's put a blessing on it, and they're going to find out whether they're right or not.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for that overview. And if you have any further questions, put them in the chat and we'll get to them later. I think we're going to switch now to local redistricting. And Janet Grant is up and is going to talk to us about what's going on in the world of local redistricting.
Great, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Al. I have some questions for you, so I'm anxious to be able to get to those later as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about what local redistricting is, and then we're going to talk about a couple of examples in communities across Georgia. So first of all, local redistricting is just what we went through, this last fall during special session, but at the local level. And when you think about it, we have 159 counties. So we have county commissions across all those counties. We have county school boards. We have municipalities in huge numbers to do redistricting. And in 2019, a new law was put into effect. It was passed on a bipartisan basis, unusual these days in our legislature. But Senate Bill 177 passed a law that made it a requirement for local municipalities when they are passing new maps to have a review by the LCRO. And the LCRO is the nonpartisan organization in the legislature that draws the maps. So they're the kind of the support map drawers. And they have to now also, in addition to supporting the map drawing at the state level, they now have to do a technical review for all of these local maps. And so we are in kind of a time crunch right now. Obviously, you know, the same as we had delays related to the larger redistricting across the state. Those same delays impacted local redistricting, and local redistricting used to be on the agenda during special session, but this time, because of the delays and the crunch for the regular cycle during special session, local redistricting is now being handled during the regular session. However, the Secretary of State has said to counties, you have to have new districts inputted into the system by the 18th of February. So, so technically the deadline is those maps, especially the county and county commissions and county school boards really need to be on a fast track here to be done and be able to then be put into place, because candidate filing for those elections and those seats starts in early March. And for those positions, those seats that are up here in 2022, this redistricting really needs to happen now. We have a little bit more time related to city redistricting because most of those municipal elections are on the odd year cycle. So we would have until next year for that. So during the special session, you may have seen some of the articles written about some bills that got introduced kind of off the purpose of the special session, but related to Gwinnett, both in terms of redrawing the county commission lines there and in moving the Board of Education to a nonpartisan election. And a lot of concerns came out during that time, and it certainly illustrated the importance of local redistricting. There's a lot of kind of nefarious things that can happen. So we want to bring attention to all of you. And there's a lot of organizations trying to bring more attention to local redistricting and how important it is when you think about it. So much of our kind of day-to-day lives as residents of our local communities is really dependent on our local elected officials. And so we really need to be advocating at local levels and for the same kinds of things that we advocated for at the state levels: transparency, public input, fairness, honoring communities of interest, and to not allow, you know, the gerrymandering that we're concerned about to be happening at the local level. So let's talk about a couple of examples that are happening real time right now. In fact, I literally just changed this slide about an hour ago. So in DeKalb County, which is where I live, DeKalb grew by 72,000 over the last decade. And the county commission held 2 public meetings back in December. Unfortunately, they weren't very well publicized. There were only a handful of people that even knew about them and showed up to be able to make comments. But those that did come raised issues about transparency, the opportunity for public engagement, district deviation. The maps that had been proposed had huge deviations. Preserving communities of interest, including the cities. The mayor of Brookhaven was there and said all the mayors across the county really didn't want their city split. And that sounds familiar, given all of our focus on city splitting in the regular redistricting cycle last year as well. And then super commissions. So you can see that there are 2 maps here. We have 7 county commissioners in DeKalb. 5 are elected in the districts that are on the left here. And on the right map are super commission districts. So there are 2 commissioners that are elected across these larger districts. And questions came up about that in those hearings. And we were told that that was something that would be addressed later in a charter kind of review. So the county commission went forward with submitting are approving their maps, tentatively approving pending LCRO review, though they went in the end of December to the LCRO for review, and that review has come back. There were technical changes that were made to these maps, and we literally just got these about an hour and a half ago. The House Delegation Committee from the legislature is going to be hosting public hearings now on these maps. And those are going to be during their weekly noon on Wednesday delegation meetings. I will be posting here links for that. Those two on the 2nd and on the 9th are at noon, and they're going to be on Facebook Live. And then there will be a dedicated session in the evening on the 8th at 6:30 that there'll be a Zoom link for. So I'll get that for anyone that's interested in participating. So the House delegation is moving forward with these public hearings based on, the updated maps that the commissioners themselves put forward. But on the Senate side, Senator Jones, who is the lead of the delegation in the Senate, asked the LCRO to develop an alternative map. And his map, we have not seen it. It hasn't been made public. There was an AJC article about it last week, is supposedly removing the super districts and having 7 equal districts across the county. So we could have some dueling maps here. But at this point, what we're talking about in these public hearings are the maps that you see here, and we will be getting more information to folks about how to access the maps and how to access those public hearings. So let's go forward and talk about Athens. I know we have some folks from Athens on the call. Just to give you a little bit of context for Athens, Athens is a county that has been a heavily Democratic county. And yet it has been also a very gerrymandered county. So they're heavily Democratic. I think it went something like 71% for Biden in the 2020 election. And yet they have a county delegation that has 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat based on the way the lines have been drawn in the past. And the way the lines were drawn during this latest redistricting cycle, it will likely move to 6 in the delegation, 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat. So with that context, the county commission there in Athens-Clarke actually charged, I like this, they charged their Board of Elections to independently draw a new district map based on the census. And then the Board of Elections brought it to the county commissioners. I think there were a few changes made, but they passed it with a vote of 6-3 in December. Then the 4 Republican legislators ignored that map. They said that given it didn't have a complete consensus and unanimous consensus of the county commissioners, they put forward their own map. And in that map, 3 of the commissioners were drawn into even number districts. So their terms will be up at the end of this year, and they won't be able to rerun again until 2024. And very concerningly, 2 of 3 addresses in the county will move districts. So very significant changes being proposed here. The 1 Democratic delegation member proposed he put forward kind of a compromise map, and the commission actually voted in favor for it, but again, not unanimously. And so at this point where it stands is that the map that had been proposed by the Republican legislators has actually passed out of the House on Friday and is going to the Senate, and we would probably expect it to pass this week. Unfortunately, there's probably not a lot other than, Athens folks continuing to call your delegation members to make your potential concerns known. So you can see that every single one of these can be very complicated, and it's really going to take all of us being engaged in our local communities to understand what's going on and to weigh in relation to the local maps. Next slide, Ken. So we went ahead, given the complexity of this and the very quick time frame, we went ahead and put together a toolkit for folks. And you can access this toolkit on our website. And it is a kind of down and dirty, I think it's 8 pages long of explaining kind of the process for local redistricting and what you can do to get involved. And we're going to talk a little bit later about ways that you can get involved, but really encourage you, if you don't know what's happening in your local community, to be asking those questions of your local elected officials. On the flip side, we're also concerned that there are a lot of municipalities across the state that haven't redistricted in many, many years. We saw an article the other day for Doraville, and Doraville in 40 years had not redistricted. So they are redistricting right now, which is great. But we obviously want fair representation and equal population in all the districts across all these local municipalities. So this is a really important thing for us to all be concerned about in our local communities. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Brooke, and I'll be back in a little bit, and we'll talk more about what we can be doing, not just in this area, but other advocacy things in the coming months. Brooke?
Yes, thanks, Janet. And good evening, everyone. I'm Brooke White, and as Ken mentioned, I'm the new outreach chair for Fair Districts, Georgia. I'm very excited to be back in Georgia after many years away, and extremely excited to be working with Fair Districts this year. I knew once I got settled in that I wanted to find a way to get involved in the fight on the ground here for voting rights and expanding democracy. And there really is nothing that gets more to the heart of those issues than redistricting. So as Ken also shared earlier, we caught a lot of people's attention last year. And one of the big ways we did that was through the 40,000 postcards Fair Districts Georgia volunteers across the state wrote. And chances are, if you wrote cards, you met Pam Woodley at some point. And so one thing I wanted to do now to kick off the year and our entry into 2022 is to take a moment and celebrate all of the work that Pam put into organizing last year's postcarding effort. She's been just a really integral part of the team, and I'm so thrilled to be working with her again this year. And I just wanted to give a round of applause from our desks to Pam. And Pam, I wanted to see if you could say a few words about what got you involved with Fair Districts and what your experience has been like. Oh, we can't hear you, Pam.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So, yeah, first of all, I guess what I'd like to tell you all about volunteering with Fair Districts is that this is a first-rate organization. It is very small but mighty. Just for this town hall, this is the first town hall I've been on, and we had a run-through on Friday, and there was a complete run-of show already prepared about, you know, who was going to spotlight who at what moment, and who was going to transfer the, you know, the host to who at what moment. And it was so professional. Very, very impressed. The other thing I've been very impressed about is that they are extremely professional about remaining strictly nonpartisan. And as you all know, this is a very partisan era. We all have very strong feelings, but Fair Districts, of everything I'm involved in, is very strict about that, about remaining nonpartisan. And just for me personally, as far as doing the postcards, it was really a lot of fun. I felt very recognized and supported. And one of the best things about it was I felt like I got to know my state a lot better. There were people, I live in Decatur, but there were people in the Georgia mountains, in Savannah, in Valdosta, in Macon, you know, all around the state that were very passionate about this issue. And that made my job so much easier because I was shipping boxes of postcards to these people that they then distributed to their networks. And it was just a really amazing experience.
Thanks, Pam. I wanted to just again say thank you for all of your involvement this year, and just again, thank you for everything you've done and talking a little bit about your experience tonight. And you know, like Pam said and like Ken has said, you know, without all of the work of the volunteers of Fair Districts, we wouldn't have a Fair Districts Georgia. So as we're getting ready to kick off 2022, one of the major things we want to start with is hearing from all of you about your experiences in working with Fair Districts, how you were involved last year, and what types of programs are interesting to you this year. We're hoping to continue the fantastic postcarding work, the letters to the editor work, all of the advocacy and relationship building with legislators. But we really want to know from all of you where you'd like to be engaged. So we're going to drop a link in the chat to a quick, shouldn't take more than just a couple of minutes, survey, so we can hear from all of you. And we're going to be following up in the next town hall with some of the key points from it and more information about our plans for 2022 as we come out of the local redistricting work that'll wrap up in mid-February. So in the meantime, please take the survey. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for being part of Fair Districts. And I'm gonna hand it back to Janet, who's gonna take you through some of the key actions over the next couple of weeks.
Great, thanks, Brooke. So again, we talked about local redistricting, and that's really the focus, at least for the next few weeks at the county level. And then really over this next year related to other municipal elections. So some key things that you can do, download our local redistricting toolkit. And some of the actions that are suggested in our toolkit is, first of all, just get to know your local elected officials, both at the local level as well as your legislators, because the legislators actually bring forward the local redistricting to the state in order to have state approval of that. So contacting your local officials to find out what's happening, where the maps are, how to get involved in terms of reviewing those, giving public input on those, and we give some suggestions for that in that toolkit. Attending public forums, like I'm going to be going to all of those DeKalb County public forums over this next week. And testifying or submitting comments related to, again, some of the principles that we want related to fair maps. We implemented in the fall our action team, and hopefully many of you are signed up to be on our action team. And we employed that action team in the fall during the special session for last minute kinds of things, you know, contacting legislators, coming down to the State House, etc. So we will again be using that action team here during the regular session for any kinds of things that may come up that we need to engage and get you know, to be loud about. And for instance, if there is a mid-cycle redistricting bill that that drops, or some of these more controversial local redistricting bills, we'll be reaching out to engage. So on our website, you can sign up to be a member of our action team. We also have seen a huge value in our letter to the editor team. So if this is maybe feels a little bit more up your alley. We've got, I think, about 100 people now signed up for our letter to the editor team. And it's really important now that we're focused on local redistricting, that we have people all across the state that can submit, appropriate customized letters to their local papers related to the concerns about local redistricting. And then, as Ken said earlier, we're going to be focused on the elections later this year. We do not, as a nonpartisan organization, support specific candidates, but we are going to be asking all of you, and we will be asking candidates and legislators to support redistricting reform and to have that become part of the conversation as we're evaluating candidates going into the election. So these are just a few things that you can do. There's lots of ways to get involved with fair districts. You can find more on our website, and the survey that Brooke just reviewed also will be a way that we can be in touch with you about things that you may want to get involved with this year. So I guess our primary message is redistricting is not done. We are done with special session, but as you can see, there's still a lot going on with the litigation underway, all the local redistricting, and our continued work toward our ultimate goal of redistricting reform. The next slide is, and I see Janine McLean from Fair Count is on our call today. Wanted to do a plug for Fair Count, who is one of our partners in redistricting advocacy. They are continuing their Mapping Mondays. And this is a way to map your community. Again, with local redistricting underway, this is still very relevant. And their team does a great job of walking folks through being able to map your community of interest in this tool called Representable. That is actually a tool also of Princeton. So take 15 minutes, I think it takes, to actually map your community. Take one of these Mondays and participate with Fair Count in a Mapping Monday. And with that, I think we are going to go and transition to some Q&A.
Thank you, Janet. And we will be taking questions from the chat. And I think Anita is our question reader tonight. So we'll be taking selected questions for anybody who spoke tonight. And so let's go ahead and do that. We'll take a few minutes for questions. And then I have one more slide to present at the very end, which I hope you'll enjoy. So please, if you have any questions in the chat, let's have them. And Anita, I think you're up to pick out the questions that we want to address.
Yes. Mary Lou asked if we are frozen, what U.S. House, Georgia House, and Georgia Senate districts do we use for the 22 election?
I think, Al, that's a question for you. Like, if the courts decide that the districts are in limbo, they're being challenged, what happens in the election that we're going to run this year? And you need to unmute, Al, so we can hear you. You're still on mute, Al.
Unmute. There we go. We'll use the maps as drawn. They will be govern the elections until a court displaces them. So sometimes you'll have a state where the maps will be used for 1 or 2 or even 3 election cycles, and then have a court invalidate them 6 years after they originally passed. So you have, half a decade of elections that are malapportioned. But right now, the answer is the maps as drawn.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Next, Gina Smith. She basically made a statement. What is happening at the local level mirrors what we went through at the state and federal level. And our state senators and representatives are standing pat. She says she spoke to Senator Frank Ginn, who called her, and he does not care that and insists that what they did is legal. And she asked, how do we fight this when they have all the power?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You know, gerrymandering may be perfectly legal, but it's also perfectly wrong. And that's really what we're advocating is trying to change that. You know, we need all in the long run, we got to get legislation. We got to find candidates and incumbents who will start to support reform legislation. I know I saw a comment in the chat about a citizens commission to do redistricting. That bill is actually pending in our state legislature right now. That particular change requires a Georgia constitutional amendment, which means it would take 2/3 of the state house, 2/3 of the state senate, and then ultimately a vote by us citizens on a general election ballot. So that's a long haul process, but we do think it's the best model in the long run. We're just a long ways away from fixing that. So in the meantime, what we have to do is make a lot of noise like we did last year. We got tremendous coverage in the media and the press all across the state when the maps were being drawn and they were being unfairly drawn. We were on television, we were in the major newspapers, the minor newspapers, the letters to the editor. I think we placed, I can't remember the number, but it was, you know, a few hundred letters in local news outlets to basically tell people, alert people, this is wrong. And it, you know, when your state rep starts to see their name in the local paper and has having been accused of standing pat or not doing what's right for the citizens, it does start to make a difference. And so we just have to continue to advocate, continue to make noise. Take, you know, your local media, many of the local news outlets are very hungry for stories because they don't have the reporting skills that they used to. So a letter to the editor or some advocacy materials or materials you can take from our website and give them to help advocate for fairness in this process. The more they know about it, the more they'll write about it. And so really it just becomes a huge public pressure campaign. We just have to keep it up. It's just that in last year, we were all organized around one event called November. Now it's going to be an ongoing process. So there's no silver bullet. It's just continue to organize, continue to press. You know, we may get some relief in the courts, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Okay. Sydney Schneider asked, does every county have both regular districts and super districts? I know mine does not have a super district. So
yeah, no, every county is different. And that's one of the challenges, given that we have so many 159 counties, all of those are different. All the municipalities are different. We're actually starting a project, if anyone's interested in working with us on it, to potentially catalog what all of those look like all across the state so that we can track whether redistricting is happening appropriately all across the state as well. So no, it's complicated because it does vary everywhere.
okay. Lucy Julia Hale said that in Floyd County, the NAACP, Nonpartisan Political Action Committee, League of Women Voters and former member of SCLC for 20 years. She's wondering if she should rejoin SCLC since it has just joined suits around Georgia redistricting.
Maybe Al can answer that question. That's kind of the role of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in litigation, Al.
Yeah, they've been involved in, they're not immediately involved in any of the litigation that's currently going on. But if the question is whether she should support or join an organization that, has the outlook and the energy of SCLC, I'd say sure. But right now, when you have these cases that are filed, the organizations who are involved in litigation, they have to find some individual plaintiffs who live in each area that is subject to challenge or they're making voting dilution claim about. And then you have organizational groups like Alpha Phi Alpha organizations that have an interest in voting rights, and they are plaintiffs in their capacity as an organization that has an interest in voting rights. So you have, you can set up cases pretty readily now. SCLC just hadn't been on the radar screen very much lately, but there are a lot of good lawyers and good organizations doing the litigation right now.
Okay. Monica Wills Brown asks, can someone speak to HB 1028? It was presented Friday, the 27th for first reading. It's the Cobb County School Board redistricting, and there is concern that it is being pushed through rather quickly. And I can tell you in my county, same thing is happening. They completely changed the maps and they're shoving it through.
Yeah, I can't speak to that exactly. I do know there are a number of organizations that are very focused on Cobb County. The League of Women Voters has been very focused on what's happening in Cobb County, and I know there are some concerns. All of this is happening very quickly, back to the deadline that I talked about earlier for both county commissions and county boards of education. The goal is to have these done by the 18th of February. So unfortunately, it is happening very quickly. Ken, do you know anything more specific about the Cobb Board of Election?
This is the school board, right? The school board
Yes.
question. And I know that the Georgia Youth Justice
Sorry.
Coalition and the Georgia Redistricting Alliance has a group working on the school board maps, and they're very interested, very concerned about the Cobb map. I know. I'm not up to speed on their particular advocacy, but what they're trying to do is get students and parents in that school district to come and speak up and get involved in that process. And I don't know the specifics of what events or what they're planning on, but it's on the radar screen of the group that's looking at the school board maps across the state. They're focusing really on, I think, 3 counties of interest: Cobb, Gwinnett, and I'm not sure the other county that they're looking at, but it's on their radar screen. If somebody's interested, we can get you a contact with that group that's working on school board maps, and if somebody wants to drop a question about, if you can get the contact info, Anita, in the chat, we can point them to that group of people that's working on that.
Okay.
Let's take one other question. I know we're running over.
Okay.
We'll try to wrap up by 8:05. So if you have one further question, we'll do that. And then I'll close with one additional slide.
Okay. Warren Cannon asks, let's see. He says that getting information to the general public is important. What mechanisms are there besides local newspapers?
Well, I mean, maybe Brooke has some ideas. I'll tell you that there's nothing wrong with you calling a meeting in your community. Get your local, your homeowners association, PTA in school board would be a great organization to say, run a PTA meeting and have it to address your school board question, right? If you're involved in an organization locally, just set up your own meetings on it, right? You can get to the newspaper, but just start calling meetings. Typically, if you have a meeting on a topic of this level, I would guess you'd get local media to potentially come out and cover the meeting. So that would be my first take, is just start getting something going and let people know. Brooke, you're kind of looking at outreach in a more general sense. What ideas would you offer at this point?
I would say that the best tool is your mouth, and opening it to all of your neighbors and your friends in your community, and being a real voice for this. A lot of people, it's the sort of thing that doesn't really cross a lot of people's minds on a day-to-day basis, but by you bringing it to their attention, that can really go a long way. And there are lots of resources around sort of the technical aspects of it available on the website to sort of help have those conversations with your friends and neighbors. I think Karen's suggestion about using social media, using any neighborhood groups, anything like that to pass along any information you can next door is another great way to connect with others in your neighborhood. But I mean, part of me would like to be out at intersections with a big poster board, even just any opportunity you can to tell everyone, you know, I mean, down to the deli counter and the checkout person at your grocery store. It's just so important.
Right. What we saw last year when they had the hearings all across the state, there were 11 different hearings, and what we saw was certain groups that were already politically active sort of nominated a few people to come and speak, and so they kind of got their story together, and then they stood up and spoke. And so if there's an opportunity to speak at your local school board meeting or at your county commission meeting, many times there's a public comment period at those meetings, even if they're not talking about this subject. You can go there and say, let's have this discussion. What's going on? What are you doing about redistricting? And how do we get involved? Just demand transparency, ask to be involved, And I mean, I think once you're on their radar screen, then it starts to snowball and people will start to look at it. Redistricting again is it's still going to be a hot topic this year, but much more local. So, part of what we'll do as we go throughout the year is try to give you more guidelines on local programs. But I think it's has to do with standing up, organizing a few people, appointing a good spokesperson, and having that person start to call meetings, get to a hearing, go to your little school board meeting. They have to meet periodically in public forum, get there and get on a radar screen and start making noise. I think that's how it all starts. And then you can navigate from there. So again, listen, I want to thank everybody. I'm going to present one final slide, and then we'll get going. Then we'll call it a night. I know that we are probably keeping you from your daily Wordle, and I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna share a Wordle with you right here that we made up for tonight. But first, before I do that, let me just let you know a couple things. First of all, again, thank you for your participation. You can email us info@fairdistrictsga.org. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all the same handle. Our website, tremendous resource. We will have another town hall on February 28th. We'll be talking about more of the programs that are going to be available. We appreciate your support. Financial support is always helpful. Our donate link on our website goes to a PayPal, which you can use from a credit card or PayPal account. And we also now take Venmo. And so any support you can give us is great. We hope to be, putting those funds to good use. So I promised you a little game here. We're going to do a little Wordle. Since everybody in the world is doing Wordle, we don't want to miss an important fad. And so let me just talk about this and say our first word is watch. And you can see it scores pretty well. We got a T in the right location, but we have got to keep vigilant. We have to keep watching what's going on. And it's become more complicated because now it's much more local. So we have to keep watching what's going on, not only at the Capitol, but at each and every of your county boards. Elect is the next word we'll try. We've got the C and the T now here. It's an election year. We have to make this an issue in the election. We have to figure out how to keep this issue in front. And really, it's about getting your candidates. If you want to run for office for me, I want to know that you support redistricting reform. And we'll have some principles that we'll share with you, but you can start that process right now without waiting for any more information. It's local, right? We're going to get local. We have to get this action going locally. That's really all of that. That's how it's really going to happen. And it all points to actions. And I realized I had to break the rules and add an extra letter. But at the end of the day, the winning word for tonight is action, because there is a lot going on and a lot that you can do. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. We'll see you again at the end of February. It's the last Monday in February. We'll have the next town hall. And again, I want to thank everybody for their participation this evening, and have a good night.